What do you say after that? I heard a story today. There were three guys, and they are hiking, and they get to this river, and it's a pretty wide river, and it's rolling fast. Things are moving. And so the first guy kind of steps to the edge, and he says to the universe, "Give me strength to get across this river." Poof. Guy feels a little different, dives in, and is able, with this newfound strength from the universe, to swim across the river. Second guy goes, "Oh, shoot." Gets to the edge, and he goes, "Okay, universe, I declare and decree that I have strength and tools to get across this river." Boom! You can feel his muscles getting bigger, and all of a sudden in front of him is a boat. He gets in the boat, across the river. Third guy steps up, kind of looks around, says, "Universe, I declare, I decree, I know right here, right now, that I have the strength, the tools, and the intelligence to get across this river." Poof! All of a sudden, he's a woman. He takes out a map, and he walks down 200 yards, crosses the bridge, and gets to the other side. So the title of my talk is When Going Backward is Going Forward. Now, before the grammar police come out, I looked it up. Backwards and forwards is the British way to say it. The American English way to say it is get backward and forward. So let's get that out of the way right now. So when backward is going forward, so that kind of made me think, well, maybe I should, like in some movies, start my talk by the end of the talk. So here's the end of the talk. You are powerful, capable, always at choice, open and ready, operating at the speed of the divine. That's it. That's what we're leading up to. Now you might wonder, what is the paradox in this, that I'm writing going backwards to go forwards? Now there's a psychotherapy concept, and this is in French, so give me a second. As reculer pour mieux sauter, which means going backward to be able to leap forward. So the ones who have studied this know this. The process of going backward to your beginnings, whether you do it on your own, in a support group, with a therapist, with a practitioner, with any sort of counselor or healer, can in effect give you a running start when you need or are required to go forward again. Now, when do we do that successfully? We all do that successfully when we use palindromes. You know what palindromes are? Palindromes are when a word is spelled the same way forwards, like you usually read it, as in backwards, like the word race car. The word civic, kayak is the same, backwards or forwards. Noon is the same, radar. Sagas, solos, tenet is the same backwards as forward. And the word wow is the same backwards and forwards. Another way you do this is through grief. Now, when we're grieving, especially for a person and sometimes for our animal people, we have a memorial or a life celebration of some sort, and that's full of memories. And those memories add to our grieving process and actually push us forward through the process. Gratitude is a way to go forward by going backwards, because gratitude is actually talking about a past experience. Because as soon as you're grateful for something, you're not in the now anymore. You're already past it. So there's many ways we do this. Now, in the process, you step into when you go backwards to go forwards, was explained to me in a blog I was reading by a gentleman named Friar Richard Rohr.
Yes.
Have you read his stuff?
Oh,
Yeah.
one of our
He's
favorite.
from New Mexico, I believe. He's in New Mexico, and he's at the Center for Action and Contemplation. It's a meditation blog, and this is from his blog entitled Living on the Edge. And he's talking about liminal space. And let him explain what that is. Liminal space, which is from the Latin limen for threshold, is an inner state and sometimes an outer situation where we can begin to think and act in genuinely new ways. It is when we are betwixt and between, having left one room or stage of life, but not yet entered the next. We often enter liminal space when our former way of being is challenged or changed. Perhaps when we lose a job or a loved one during illness, engagement, or at the birth of a child. During this graced time, we are not certain or in control. This openness allows room for something genuinely new to happen. We are empty and receptive, an erased tablet waiting for new words. Liminal space is where we are most teachable. So I want to give you a few literary examples of characters being in liminal space. The time between the murder of Bruce Wayne's parents and when he finally becomes Batman.
Yes.
In Star Wars, when Luke Skywalker goes to the planet of Dagobah and meets Yoda, there is that apprenticeship there. That is his liminal space. It's in a swamp, which is probably not the best place, but it happened good for him. For those who are very literary, in Pride and Prejudice, because I know you've all read that in junior high, between Elizabeth Bennet's realization that she likes Mr. Darcy and the moment she agrees to marry him, that is liminal space, and also the entire novel. That is where we transform liminal space. Sometimes it's radical, sometimes it's not, but we reveal and we reorganize our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about things, or maybe just one thing or idea, and thus our actions and our perspective and then, of course, our experiences change after that. It's a rite of passage, liminal space, like going off to college, having a bar mitzvah is a big liminal space for little 13-year-old, 12, 13-year-old Jewish boys and girls. I had a bar mitzvah. It was quite the big liminal space, even though there was 4 years of education to get to that 45 minutes an hour of a ceremony. It took 4 years of learning Hebrew and then learning the songs and And in the old days, when you went to the bar mitzvah, this ritual represented that now as you are an adult in the religion. So you had certain rights. Nobody pays attention to that anymore, maybe in Israel, I'm not sure. But that's a rite of passage where you are getting into liminal space. When I moved in with Peach, that's a liminal space because, there was her stuff and my stuff and what was going to stay, what was going to go in storage, what was going to get lost, the closet space, which I got nothing. I got a drawer. So after 5 years, now I have 2 drawers. No. So some are daunting challenges and some are seemingly destructive and chaotic, at least at the time. Sometimes you're heartbroken. Sometimes you feel lost. Sometimes you feel like you got to start over. But a lot of times you're like, now what? Now what do I do? I feel like I am doing life backwards in heels. That's the shoes. Backwards in heels. Do you remember that phrase, backwards in heels? It's extra difficult for men, of course. But that phrase originated in 1982. Frank and Ernest cartoon. I don't know, I've never seen a Frank and Ernest cartoon, which is written by Robert Thaves. He was talking about Ginger Rogers. And he said, sure, he was talking about Fred Astaire, actually. And he said, sure, he was great, meaning Fred Astaire, but don't forget that Ginger Rogers did everything he did backwards and in heels. So who's felt that way? Anybody felt that way in life? Where you feel like, where you feel like you're going backwards in heels? Now, most of the time we won't do it with the grace, ease, and talent of Ginger Rogers, but it's a necessary negative sometimes for us to do. But not all the time. There's a story about a yoga teacher, and she was telling her students, you know, some yoga teachers actually inspire. They don't just, you know, put you in positions. And she was saying sometimes you feel as though you are riding the bicycle backwards. You feel like you are backtracking and heading in the wrong direction. But what really is happening is contraction and release. The universe is preparing you for something much greater, and like a slingshot, it's going to shoot you forward. You just have to move backwards for a little bit. So in some ways, it's a spiritual practice. It's kind of the idea of you close the door and you open the window, right? So let me go back to one of the things Friar Rohr said. We often enter liminal space when our former way of being is challenged or changed. Like Heather was talking about as she moved in her journey from where she was brought up religiously, and what she was feeling was right for her now. And I won't tell you the story, but it's a great story and a great journey. And you're still on it to some extent. We all are. Transformation is about decision. Decision to stay in the dark or step into the light. Back to Friar Rohr, he said, remember, during this graced time, we are not certain or in control. This openness allows room for something genuinely new to happen. We are empty and receptive, an erased tablet waiting for new words. Liminal space is where we are most teachable. You know, sometimes we sit in resistance to the yuckiness that happens in our lives. Some things happen and are yucky. And I don't know how they got there for you. Most of the time, I don't know how they got there for me as far as the incidents that surrounded the yuckiness. And I would say 99% of the time, you don't even need to know. If you want to know, you can go searching, of course, as far as what's going on with your thoughts and feelings and beliefs that brought this yuckiness. But the yuckiness is not something to resist. Because you know what? You resist, persist, right? So go ahead, be sad, be disappointed, be angry, whatever. Go through it for 45 seconds, and then take action. But where you're taking action is not necessarily out here, but in here. You got to start here. You got to decide, do I want to experience a woe is me life or a palindrome, wow is me life? You got to decide, do I want to do it the hard way and push and shove, or do I want to do it the natural and organic way, the, like I said a few weeks ago, and you mentioned, Heather, the factory settings way, or whoever mentioned that just a few minutes ago. Decide, per Ralph Waldo Emerson, where he said to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. And these circumstances that show up that are sucky in one way or another, you start feeling like the world is telling you. You start feeling like the universe is telling you, well, that's the way it is. And you don't have to do that. Or when your parent says this or that, or when your teacher says this or that. The way we were brought up, and the negative ways we were brought up, that slows us down, that makes us 30 or more years later going, I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm not tall enough, whatever. That kind of stuff is what Ralph is talking about. So, what is he's mentioning mean, what is let me tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story about a caterpillar. So caterpillar is, going his or her way, and hits a wall. Looks over there, the wall is going on forever. Looks this way, oh, the wall must be a Chinese caterpillar because the wall was very long. And the caterpillar looks up and the wall is way up there. So the caterpillar sits and thinks, well, how am I got to get around this? I don't want to go back. Well, what's my choices? My choices is I can crawl up this thing like some Navy SEAL and push and pull and, and maybe even feel like Sisyphus and constantly going. Or maybe something will come to me. So the caterpillar gets down off the, just kind of looked up, gets down, decides to crawl up a nearby tree and just patiently wait till something comes to it. And lo and behold, it had transformation. Turned into a butterfly, flew up, over, and beyond the wall. The idea of that is we transform by transcending. We transcend by transforming. And if we are patient and use our inner tools, we will butterfly our way out of, through, around any situation. In liminal space, if we decide to be patient, we use that as a strategy to self-emerge. The trick is when you're in that liminal space, when you're in that graced time, that teachable moment, the trick is to do these few things. Stop. Listen. And stop working on the solution. Stop working on the fix. What's the fix? What do I do now? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Around and around like a whirling dervish in your head. These decisions, these plans, these strategies. If I do this and do that, if I can get him to do this and her to go over there, then this will happen and then I'll get out of this. Stop that. Stop the hows and commit to the what. That is when you stop and listen, stop the thinking and the strategizing and the problem solving, that's when you commit to the what. And what comes out of that, what transforms you, because you're going backward, is when you remember who you are. When you get back to basics. There's a woman, a Berkeley psychotherapist and teacher of Jewish mysticism. Her name is Estelle Frankel, and she wrote, if I take the time to sit down, close my eyes, say a prayer, open myself to spirit, then my identity begins to expand and I remember that I'm not just Estelle, the personality, that I'm a soul, that I'm an embodiment of the divine, and I move from what Jewish mystics say is small mind, and the Buddhists say this too, to big mind. And in that other state, the bonds of the self, the small identity that limits us and dictates who we think we are, it frees us. It frees us up. It's sort of like a zooming out, like you would do with a camera, but it's zooming out all the way to infinity, all the way to eternity, beyond time, beyond space, all the way to eternity. And in that moment, she says, of deep meditation or prayer or any sort of spiritual practice, anything becomes possible because you are rising above the workings of time. You're allowing self, with the big S, to emerge. It's so simple, really. It really is so simple to bring that new you, which is an old you, so you're going backwards in a way to re-reveal the divinity in you because you forgot. Yeah. Because you're in this whirlwind of, oh, I don't like this situation, whatever it is. And you're trying to solve the problem instead of allowing the universe to inform you and get in there with you and work the how. the answer or treat may hide in so-and-so's books sometimes. This is just one little quick thing I want to mention about this. You know, you can read books, you can come here, you can take classes, you can read all kinds of books. You can remember these phrases, thoughts are things, change your thinking, change your life, the universe has your back. You could do the countdown method. Anybody know the countdown method from Mel Robbins? Mel Robbins is a great inspirational thinker. She doesn't like to be called a motivational speaker because she thinks motivation is junk. But she has this countdown thing where she counts down like at a rocket ship, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then she goes. She doesn't allow herself to think. So if it's she feels like she's having a difficult morning, doesn't want to get up, and I've seen her describe a time period where that was happening a lot, and finally she was like, you know, I can't get myself motivated, and then she realized motivation is junk. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, out of bed, go. No thinking. Ba-ba-da-ba, do the kids, and then get the kids to school, ba-ba-da-ba, go do whatever she needed to do during the day. And now she teaches that. That's her big thing. Or you can take the dynamic, bold action that Tony Robbins talks about, no relation. Or you can do affirmative prayer, but anything that you do like that, or that you read in these books that you're reading now, or that have been written in the last 50 to 100 years, that's all ancient wisdom in new words.
Totally.
Jason and Heather and I were talking about that earlier in the week. If you read the Upanishads, if you read the scriptures correctly, let's say, and other ancient wisdom things, the Greeks, lots of great Greek stuff with this kind of inspiring knowledge, they're all saying the same thing. All these books say. Even the countdown method, because obviously there wasn't space, that kind of rocket ships and stuff back then. And you know, an interesting thing, as I write the several books I'm writing right now, it hits me every once in a while. I'll get to a chapter and I'll write this stuff and I'll write it all out and I'll think, yeah, so what? Now it's in my way. I'm saying in my way, so there's probably a little goofiness in there, a little for lack of a better phrase, intellect in there, logic in there, because that's the way I am. But then I read it and I go, well, so what? You could read that in whatever. And that sometimes slows me down, and other times I go, yeah, but somebody's going to read it the way I say it and get it, versus reading it in the Upanishads or any Vedic philosophy or some Greek philosopher. All ancient wisdom, all that comes from all those old cultures, they're all saying the same thing, that there is a vibration and energy that's always there to tap into, and we get to tap into it. And when we're in this liminal space, when we're in this area of, I don't know what's going on, what do I do, step back. As I said a few weeks ago, allow the factory settings to set in, to reboot, to refresh. And then we can move any story, because they're all just stories, of woe is me to wow is me. Any story of indecision to decision, loss of control to being back in control. Although you want to have a life of a little bit of not in control, that's kind of fun. It brings variety. So, Ernest Holmes tells us there's a living presence within, and I recognize it as the one and only power in the universe, and I unify with it. With it that is within each and every one of us. So stop and listen. The universe is there. The universe is waiting to do the hows. We just have to know the what. The strategy will come to us when we step backwards to go forwards by realizing, revealing, or revealing, if you felt like you've never done it before, that divinity that is within all of us. And in those liminal spaces where we are most teachable, we get back to basics and we transform into what we already are, so that we know and we reunite to that which is within us that knows that we are powerful, capable, always a choice, open and ready, operating at the speed of the divine, but also at the speed of love. Loving life, even backwards in heels. Thank you all.